Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to share and subscribe the channel. The meteor tore through the night sky, a brilliant streak of azure and silver that silenced the chorus of crickets as it passed overhead. Theo Blackwood lowered his telescope, mouth slightly open as he tracked the object's descent. It wasn't following a normal trajectory, it was adjusting, slowing, almost as if it were trying to land rather than crash. Theo had spent 15 years as an amateur astronomer, documenting celestial events from his modest observatory built on the edge of his property. He'd witnessed meteor showers, comets, even a satellite re-entry, but never anything like this. The object disappeared behind the tree line at the far edge of his land, and a dull thud followed by a flash of light confirmed it had made impact. His rational mind told him to call someone, the police, the university, perhaps even the military. Instead, he grabbed his flashlight jacket and the old hunting rifle his father had left him. Something pulled him toward the crash site with an urgency he couldn't explain. The November air bit at his face as he trudged through the field, his boots crunching over frosted grass. The smell reached him first, ozone mixed with something sweetly metallic like copper and honey. As he approached the impact site, he noticed something odd. There was no fire, no smoke, just a soft, pulsing glow emanating from the shallow crater. "Hello," he called out, rifle held loosely at his side. "Is anyone there?" The object wasn't what he expected. Instead of twisted metal or rock, a smooth, oval pod sat half buried in the earth. Its surface rippled like mercury under moonlight, shifting patterns playing across its hull. A seam appeared along one side, widening as Theo approached. His flashlight beam caught movement inside, fingers, slender and pale with an iridescent sheen, curled around the edge of the opening. Then a face emerged and Theo stumbled backward. She was humanoid but unmistakably alien. Her features were delicate, almost too symmetrical, framed by hair that seemed to absorb and reflect light like fiber optics. But it was her eyes that held him rooted to the spot, large, almond-shaped, with irises that shifted color from deep violet to vibrant turquoise. "Please," she whispered, her voice melodic but strained. "Help me." Theo raised his rifle instinctively, though he kept it pointed at the ground. "Who are you? What are you?" She winced, pulling herself further from the pod. A dark liquid shimmering like oil mixed with stardust seeped from a wound on her side. "My name is Navia. I am not from your world." She swayed, clearly weakened. "They will come for me. Please, I need shelter." "Who's coming for you?" Theo demanded, even as he found himself lowering the rifle completely. "The collectors they track, fugitives." She took a shuddering breath. "I escaped. I cannot go back." Above them, the stars winked out one by one as clouds rolled in threatening rain. A decision formed in Theo's mind, against all logic, against everything he should do in this situation. "Can you walk?" he asked. Navia nodded weakly. Theo approached cautiously, helping her from the pod. She was lighter than her height suggested, and her skin was cool to the touch. As he supported her weight, he noticed small, intricate patterns beneath her skin that glowed faintly like circuitry. "My cabin is close," he said, guiding her toward the path. "We need to get you out of sight." The walk back was tense, with Navia leaning heavily against him. Twice she stumbled, and each time Theo found himself more concerned for her welfare than afraid of what she might be. The rain began just as they reached his cabin, fat droplets that turned quickly to a downpour. Inside, Theo helped Navia to his couch. The living room, with its walls of books and maps of constellations, seemed suddenly small and mundane in the presence of this otherworldly being. She looked around with curiosity despite her obvious pain. "Let me see your wound," Theo said, approaching with a first aid kit. Navia hesitated, then moved her hand from her side. The injury was unlike anything Theo had seen. The edges seemed to be slowly knitting together on their own, the strange fluid coalescing and being reabsorbed into her body. "I will heal," she said, seeing his confusion. "My physiology is different from yours." Theo handed her a blanket, which she accepted with a grateful nod. "You said the collectors are coming. Who are they? What do they want with you?" Navia's gaze dropped to her hands. "They enforce the laws of my world. I am property and asset." "Property," Theo repeated, disbelief coloring his voice. "You're a slave." "Not as you understand it." Her eyes met his again. "I was created, not born, designed for a purpose that I rejected." Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the roof. Theo paced, trying to process what was happening. An alien fugitive sitting on his couch talking about being created property. "Why Earth?" he finally asked. Of all the places you could have gone. A small, sad smile curved Navia's lips. Your world is unremarkable to my people, hidden, safe, and, she hesitated, humans possess something we lack. Technology, resources. Emotion, she said simply, true emotion. We can mimic it, simulate it through biochemical processes, but it is not the same. Your kind feels with such intensity, such honesty. It fascinated me. Before Theo could respond, a low, thrumming sound penetrated the cabin walls. Not quite a hum, not quite a vibration, but something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Navia stiffened, her eyes widening with unmistakable fear. They're here, she whispered, sooner than I expected. Theo moved to the window, peering through the rain-streaked glass. At first, he saw nothing but darkness and the sheets of water cascading from the sky. Then movement, sleek shapes gliding through the downpour, too fluid to be human. Lights pulsed beneath their surfaces, cold and methodical. How many? Navia asked, her voice tight. 3, maybe 4, Theo replied, stepping back from the window. What do we do? Navia stood shakily, the blanket falling away. The patterns beneath her skin brightened, and she raised her hand toward the cabin's main light. It flickered, then grew brighter before dimming to a soft glow. I can mask our presence temporarily, she said, but we must leave now. There's a cellar, Theo said, moving toward the kitchen. Under the floorboards, it's where I keep my astronomical equipment and supplies. We could hide there. A sound like crystal chimes filled the air as one of the shapes approached the cabin. Navia nodded quickly. Show me. Theo led her to the kitchen, pulling up the trapdoor hidden under an old rug. As they descended into the darkness below, a thunderous knock rattled the cabin door. Navia's hand found Theo's in the shadows, her fingers intertwining with his. Her touch sent a strange warmth through him, calming despite the danger. They will find us eventually, she whispered. But I can give you what no human woman ever could, Theo Blackwood, if you help me survive this night. What is that? He asked, his voice barely audible over the persistent knocking above. Her eyes glowed in the darkness of the cellar, shifting from violet to a deep cosmic blue. A chance to touch the stars without ever leaving Earth. The cellar air hung thick with dust and anticipation. Theo's astronomical equipment, telescopes, cameras, and star charts cast strange shadows in the dim light filtering through the floorboards above. Each footstep overhead sent fine particles drifting down like snow. The collectors moved with methodical precision, their movements almost silent save for occasional crystalline sounds. What exactly are they? Theo whispered, crouched beside Navia behind a storage cabinet. Sentinels, Navia replied, her voice barely audible. Biosynthetic hunters created to retrieve assets like me. She placed a hand against the cellar wall and the patterns beneath her skin pulsed gently. They track bioenergetic signatures, the energy my kind emits. A sharp, piercing sound cut through the air, metal scraping against metal. The trapdoor handle was turning. They've found us, Theo hissed, reaching for a heavy wrench from his toolkit. Navia shook her head. Not yet, they're searching methodically, her eyes narrowed in concentration. I can create a diversion. She extended her arm, the luminescent patterns intensifying. Above them, the cabin's electrical system surged. Light bulbs exploded, the microwave sparked to life, and the television blared static. The sudden chaos sent the collectors moving away from the trapdoor toward the electronic disturbances. We need to move, Navia said. There's a maintenance tunnel beneath this cellar, isn't there? I sensed the hollow space when we entered. Theo looked at her in surprise. Yes, it leads to the observatory. How did you? I perceive structural geometry differently than humans. She gestured toward the far wall, quick before they return. Theo shifted a heavy storage unit, revealing a narrow crawl space. It's tight, but we should fit. He glanced at Navia. Ladies first. A ghost of a smile crossed her face as she slipped into the passage, her movements fluid despite her injury. Theo followed, pulling the storage unit back as best he could before squeezing through. The tunnel was cold and damp, barely high enough to crawl through. They moved in silence for several minutes, the sounds from the cabin growing fainter. When they finally emerged into the small observatory Theo had built, Navia gasped softly. The domed room was Theo's pride, a homemade planetarium with charts covering the walls and a retractable roof that now revealed the rain-washed sky. The storm had passed, leaving behind a crystal-clear view of the stars. Your passion, Navia said, looking around with undisguised wonder. You study the cosmos. Amateur astronomy, Theo admitted, checking the windows. I always wanted to reach the stars. Closest I ever got was mapping them. There's power in observation, she replied, touching one of his hand-drawn star charts. Your kind sees so much with such limited perception. A distant flash of light from the direction of the cabin caught Theo's attention. They've found the tunnel, we need to keep moving. There's a vehicle nearby, Navia asked. My truck behind the observatory, but they'll expect that. Navia's expression hardened with determination. Then we give them what they expect. She approached Theo's main telescope, placing both hands on its metal frame. The patterns on her skin brightened dramatically as energy flowed from her into the equipment. What are you doing? Theo asked, watching in astonishment as the telescope's electronic components came to life, displays flickering with strange symbols. Creating a decoy, she explained, her voice strained with effort. The truck will move without us. Outside, Theo's pickup truck roared to life, headlights blazing as it reversed suddenly, then accelerated down the gravel road. Within moments, two sleek shapes detached from the shadows near the cabin, pursuing the driverless vehicle. How did you, Theo begins. Technopathy, Navia said, leaning against the telescope for support. Simple machines are easy to influence. She looked toward the forest edge. One sentinel remained behind, we must go on foot through the forest. The rain had left the forest floor slick and treacherous. They moved as quickly as they dared, Theo leading the way through familiar paths while Navia scanned continuously for signs of pursuit. The moon broke through the clouds occasionally, illuminating their way with silver light. You said you were created, Theo said as they paused near a creek. Created for what purpose? Navia was silent for a long moment, her gaze distant. My kind are interfaces, living conduits between consciousness and technology. She touched her own arm, where the circuitry-like patterns had dimmed to conserve energy. I was designed to merge with your planet's digital infrastructure to prepare it. A chill ran through Theo that had nothing to do with the night air. Prepare it for what? Integration, she said simply. My world is dying, yours is selected for colonization. The word hung between them, heavy with implication. Theo stepped back involuntarily. An invasion. Not as you imagine it, no warships, no armies. Navia's eyes reflected the moonlight, sorrowful and ancient. My people would transfer their consciousness into your digital systems, then into synthetic bodies, a quiet replacement. And you're part of that plan, anger edged into Theo's voice. You came here to help them take over our world. I came here to warn you, Navia countered, her voice firm. I escaped because I believe what they plan is wrong. Your species deserves its own path. She moved closer to him. I've studied humans for years through your transmissions, your art, your music. There is something unique here worth preserving. Before Theo could respond, a piercing tone cut through the night, high-pitched and unnatural. They both froze. The sentinel, Navia whispered, it's calling the others back. Through the trees, a figure approached, humanoid but wrong in a way that made Theo's skin crawl. It moved with liquid grace, its form shifting slightly with each step as if not quite solid. Its face was featureless save for indentations where eyes should be, glowing with the same azure light as Navia's circuitry. Asset Navia, it spoke, the words forming without lips or mouth, resonating from its entire being. Return function initiating. Navia stepped forward, placing herself between Theo and the sentinel. I renounce my designation, she called out, her voice stronger than Theo had yet heard it. I claim asylum with humanity. The sentinel tilted its head, the movement too smooth, too calculated. Asylum protocol unrecognized, retrieval non-negotiable. It raised an arm that elongated, morphing into something like a weapon. Theo reacted instinctively, charging forward and slamming his full weight into the creature. It felt like hitting warm metal, yielding yet solid. They tumbled down the embankment toward the creek. The sentinel recovered with inhuman speed, rising from the water without a sound. Theo scrambled backward, searching for a weapon, a rock, anything. The creature advanced, then suddenly convulsed, blue energy crackling across its surface. Behind it stood Navia, her hands outstretched, the patterns on her skin blazing brightly. Run, Theo, she shouted, her voice strained with effort. I can't hold it long. Instead of running, Theo grabbed a fallen branch, swinging it with all his strength at the sentinel's head. The impact shattered the branch and sent the creature staggering. Navia seized the moment, intensifying whatever energy she was channeling. The sentinel's form began to destabilize, parts of it becoming transparent, others solidifying too much. Its cohesion field, Navia gasped. Help me overload it. Understanding dawned on Theo. He splashed into the creek, grabbing the sentinel from behind and dragging it fully into the water. The creature thrashed, its movements becoming erratic. Water disrupts its energy matrix, Navia explained, wadding in after them. She placed her hands directly on the sentinel, and for a moment both she and the creature glowed with the same light. Then, with a sound like shattering glass, the sentinel collapsed, its form dissolving into the creek like quicksilver. Navia swayed, nearly falling. Theo caught her, supporting her weight as they struggled back to the bank. "Are you all right?" he asked, noticing the patterns beneath her skin were barely visible now. "I used much of my energy," she managed. "The others will have felt their companion's dissolution. We have minutes at most." In the distance, Theo could see lights approaching through the forest, the other sentinels returning. He helped Navia to her feet, scanning the area for options. "There's an old ranger station about a mile ahead," he said. "It might have a radio, possibly a vehicle." Navia nodded weakly, "Lead the way." As they moved deeper into the forest, the alien woman leaned heavily against him. Despite everything she'd revealed, the invasion plan, her role in it, Theo couldn't help but feel protective of her. She had fought for him, possibly sacrificed her only chance of escape. "Why did you help me back there?" he asked as they trudged through the underbrush. "You could have let it take me." Navia was quiet for so long that Theo thought she might not. Answer, finally she spoke, her voice soft but clear. "Because in all my studies of your kind, the quality I admired most was your capacity for choice." Her fingers tightened around his arm. "I want that freedom too, Theo. And I can give your people something in return that no human woman ever could. I can teach you how to detect and defend against what's coming." The ranger station appeared ahead, a dark silhouette against the night sky. As they approached, Theo made a decision that would alter not just his future, but potentially humanity's. "Then we better make sure you survive to do exactly that." Ranger Station stood like a forgotten sentinel among the trees, its weathered walls telling stories of seasons past. A decade of budget cuts had left it abandoned, used only occasionally by hikers or forestry officials making their seasonal rounds. For Theo and Navia, it represented their best hope for sanctuary. Theo broke a window to unlock the door, wincing at the sound of shattering glass. Inside, a thick layer of dust covered sparse furniture, a desk, 2 chairs, and a cot in the corner. A ham radio occupied one side of the room, its dials dull with age. "Can you operate that?" Theo asked, helping Navia to the cot. She studied the radio from a distance. "Primitive but functional, who would you contact?" The question gave Theo pause. Who indeed? The police? They'd be useless against the Sentinels. The military? They might capture Navia for study. Friends? He'd only put them in danger. "I don't know," he admitted, checking the cabinets for supplies. "I've spent my life looking up at the stars, not preparing for them to come looking for me." He found a first aid kit, some canned food, and most importantly, keys hanging on a hook near the door. Outside, an old forestry service truck sat beneath a lean-to, partially hidden by overgrowth. Navia's breathing had become shallow, the luminescent patterns beneath her skin flickering like dying embers. She looked up as Theo approached with water and bandages. "Your wound," he said, "it's not healing like before." "The confrontation with the Sentinel depleted me," she explained, accepting the water gratefully. "My systems are prioritizing core functions over regeneration." Theo sat beside her, unsure how to help. "Is there anything I can do?" Navia's gaze was direct, unnerving in its intensity. "There is, but it requires trust." She extended her hand, palm up, the patterns pulsing weakly. "My kind can form temporary symbiotic connections, a sharing of energy." "You want to connect with me?" Theo asked skeptically. "It's not invasive," she assured him. "Think of it as a transfusion. Your bioelectric field is remarkably strong for a human. A small portion would help me stabilize." Theo hesitated. Everything about this situation defied logic, yet he couldn't deny the evidence before his eyes. This woman, this being was real, and she was dying. "Will it hurt?" he asked. A smile touched Navia's lips, quite the opposite. Slowly, Theo placed his hand in hers. Nothing happened at first, then a warm, tingling sensation spread up his arm. It wasn't unpleasant, rather like the feeling of blood returning to a limb that had fallen asleep but without the discomfort. The patterns on Navia's skin brightened slightly and her breathing eased. "Thank you," she whispered. "What am I feeling?" Theo asked, fascinated by the sensation. The most basic form of communion, Navia explained. On my world, this is how we share information, experiences, emotions. As she spoke, Theo became aware of something else, faint impressions like memories that weren't his own. Flashes of a world with two suns, structures that seemed to grow rather than being built, faces similar to Navia's but lacking her expressiveness. I can see, he began, struggling to articulate the experience. Yes, Navia confirmed. The connection works both ways, though your perception is limited by your physiology. One image became clearer than the others. A vast chamber filled with thousands of pod-like structures, each containing a being similar to Navia, all connected to a central pillar of light. What is that place? He asked. Navia's expression grew solemn. The Genesis chamber, where I and others like me were created. She withdrew her hand gently, ending the connection. That is what awaits Earth if my people succeed, humanity reduced to vessels, your consciousness preserved but subservient to the collective. The enormity of the threat settled over Theo like a physical weight. How much time do we have? The advanced scouts have already arrived, Navia said. The collectors were sent to retrieve me before I could interfere. Full integration will begin within one of your Earth years. Theo stood abruptly, packing the small room. We need to warn people, we need proof. I am the proof, Navia said simply. And my ship, the technology it contains, would convince even your most skeptical scientists. But the ship is where we started, Theo pointed out. The collectors are probably guarding it. Navia's expression shifted to one of grim determination. Then we must reclaim it, not just for your proof, but because it contains the technical specifications of the integration process. She leaned forward, the effort clearly costing her. With that information, your scientists could develop countermeasures. Outside, a distant sound caught their attention, the low hum they'd heard before but multiplied. Theo moved to the window, peering cautiously through the grimy glass. In the distance, lights moved through the forest more than before. Reinforcements, Navia said, her voice tight. They're adapting to my presence, deploying specialized units. Theo checked the keys he'd found. How far can you move? We might be able to use that truck. Navia stood unsteadily. Far enough, but they'll track any electronic signature. The vehicle will lead them straight to us. Maybe that's what we want, Theo said, an idea forming. Your ship, can it still fly? If the core remains intact, yes. It's designed for emergency extraction. Theo grabbed the first aid kit and what supplies he could carry. Then we use their tactics against them. They expect us to run, to hide. Instead, we go right back to where we started. Navia studied him with newfound respect. A direct approach when evasion is expected. Your species' unpredictability is not exaggerated. They moved quickly to the truck, Theo helping Navia into the passenger seat. The engine protested but eventually roared to life, headlights cutting through the darkness as they pulled away from the ranger station. The Sentinels can move faster than this vehicle, Navia warned as they bumped along the overgrown forest road. I'm counting on it, Theo replied, pushing the truck as fast as he dared on the rough terrain. They'll think we're making a desperate escape, but we'll double back through Miller's Creek. There's a maintenance road that loops around to my property from the opposite direction. As predicted, it wasn't long before lights appeared in the rearview mirror, the pursuing Sentinels closing rapidly. Theo gripped the steering wheel tighter, aiming for a narrow turn ahead. When I say jump, he instructed, we both bail out. The truck will continue down the main road and will take the creek bed back. Navia nodded, bracing herself. The truck bounced violently as they approached the turn, the Sentinels now close enough that their eerie forms were visible in the mirrors. Now, Theo shouted, throwing his door open. They tumbled onto the soft ground at the roadside, rolling into the underbrush as the truck continued forward, its momentum carrying it down the road. The Sentinels streaked past, focused on the vehicle, their attention diverted exactly as Theo had hoped. For several minutes they lay still, Theo's heart pounding in his ears. When he was certain the coast was clear, he helped Navia up, and they began the difficult journey along the creek bed. Your strategy was effective, Navia acknowledged as they picked their way over rocks and fallen trees. But what happens when we reach the ship? The remaining Sentinel will be guarding it. One is better odds than many, Theo replied. And you said the ship responds to you, right? Can you activate it remotely? Navia considered this. If we get close enough, yes, but the power signature will alert the Sentinels immediately. We'll have minutes at most. They walked in silence for a time, each lost in thought. The forest around them seemed unnaturally quiet, as if the wildlife sensed the alien presence and had gone into hiding. Earlier, Theo said finally, when we connected, I felt something else, not just memories or images. Navia glanced at him. What did you feel? Loneliness, he said quietly. A profound isolation. Is that why you really came to Earth, not just to warn us, but because you were alone? Navia stopped walking, her expression vulnerable in a way it hadn't been before. My kind were not designed to be individuals. We exist as nodes in a network always connected to the collective. Her voice softened. I was defective. I experienced emotions too strongly, questioned too frequently. They tried to recalibrate me many times. But it didn't work, Theo guessed. No, each time my individuality reasserted itself. Eventually, I was designated for decommissioning. She resumed walking, her pace quicker now. When I discovered the plans for Earth, I saw an opportunity, both to escape and to warn a species I had come to admire from afar. They reached the edge of Theo's property just as dawn began to break, painting the sky in pale pinks and golds. From their position in the trees, they could see the crater where Navia's ship had landed. As expected, a single sentinel stood guard, its form occasionally shifting like mercury in sunlight. The ship's core is still active, Navia whispered, sensing something Theo couldn't. But we need a distraction. Theo surveyed the area, noticing the irrigation system he'd installed for his small garden. Those sprinklers, he said. If water disrupts their energy matrix like you said. Navia followed his gaze, understanding immediately. Yes, if you can activate them, it might destabilize the sentinel enough for me to reach the ship. I'll need to get to the control panel by the house, Theo said, already plotting his route through the underbrush. When you see the sprinklers start, make your move. They separated, Theo creeping along the perimeter of his property while Navia remained hidden at the forest edge. The sentinel seemed almost statuesque, barely moving as it stood vigil over the alien craft. Theo reached the side of his cabin, keeping low. The damage from the collector's search was evident, broken windows, the door hanging from its hinges. The irrigation control panel was on the wall beside the garden, just a few yards from where he crouched. Taking a deep breath, he darted forward, flipping open the panel and turning the system to full pressure. Water began to spray from sprinklers throughout the garden area, including those near the crater. The effect on the sentinel was immediate. As water droplets struck its form, its surface rippled violently, parts of it becoming distorted. It moved away from the spray, its movements jerky and uncoordinated. Across the yard, Navia burst from the trees, running straight for her ship. The sentinel detected her, turning with alarming speed despite its distress. Theo grabbed a garden hoe leaning against the house and charged, swinging the tool directly at the creature. The impact sent shockwaves up his arms, but the sentinel staggered, caught between Theo's assault and the disruptive spray of water. Navia reached the pod, placing her hands on its surface. The ship responded immediately, its mercury-like exterior flowing and reshaping. Theo, she called quickly. The sentinel recovered faster than expected, one arm elongating into a blade-like appendage. It slashed at Theo, who barely managed to dodge. The hoe wasn't so lucky, the metal blade sliced through it like paper. Theo scrambled toward the ship, the sentinel in pursuit. Navia stood at the open seam of the pod, one hand extended toward him, the other still connected to the ship's surface. The patterns beneath her skin blazed brightly, energy flowing between her and the craft. Jump, she shouted as Theo closed the distance. He launched himself forward just as the sentinel lunged. Navia's hand caught his, pulling him into the pod with strength that belied her slender frame. The seam sealed instantly behind him, cutting off the sentinel's reaching arm. Inside, the ship was alive with light, not mechanical displays but organic patterns similar to those on Navia's skin. She stood at the center, both hands now pressed against what appeared to be a control interface, though it bore no buttons or screens. Hold on, she warned, her voice resonating strangely within the confined space. Outside, the sentinel battered against the hull, each impact sending vibrations through the ship. Then, with a sudden lurch, they were airborne, rising rapidly from the crater, the sentinel shrinking below them. Where are we going? Theo asked, bracing himself against the wall of the pod. Navia's eyes met his, the swirling colors within them more vibrant than ever. To show you what I can give humanity, what no human woman ever could. The ship accelerated upward, breaking through the clouds into the golden light of dawn, carrying with it humanity's first true hope against the coming storm. The pod ascended with impossible speed, the ground below shrinking until Theo's property was just a speck in the vast landscape. His stomach lurched as they broke through the clouds, sunlight flooding the interior. Despite his years of dreaming about reaching the stars, the reality of being launched into the sky in an alien vessel left him clutching at the smooth walls for stability. "We're not leaving Earth, are we?" he managed to ask. Navia shook her head, her hands still connected to the ship's interface. "No, we need altitude to access the global communication network and to show you something important." The ship slowed as they reached the upper atmosphere, hovering at a height where the curvature of Earth was clearly visible. The blue planet stretched out beneath them, partially wrapped in clouds, breathtakingly beautiful. "My first view of your world was from this height," Navia said softly. "It changed me, made me question everything I had been programmed to believe." Theo moved closer to her, his fear giving way to wonder. "What did you see that was so transformative?" "Life," she replied simply. "Unregulated, unpredictable, magnificent in its chaos. My people have forgotten what it means to truly live. We exist in perfect harmony, perfect stagnation." Her expression grew distant. "We lost something essential in our pursuit of immortality." The ship's interior shifted, sections of the wall becoming transparent, offering a panoramic view of Earth below. Tiny pinpricks of light began to appear on the surface, subtle at first, then unmistakable. "What are those?" Theo asked, pointing to the lights scattered across continents. "Beacons," Navia said grimly. "Entry points where the first wave of integration has begun. Digital gateways being established in your communications infrastructure." Theo counted dozens, then hundreds of the lights. "There are so many." "Yes, the invasion isn't coming, Theo, it's already here." Navia manipulated the ship's interface and a holographic display materialized between them, complex schematics floating in 3 dimensions. "This is what I promised you, the technical specifications of the integration process. With this, your scientists can develop countermeasures." Theo studied the schematics, understanding little of the alien technology but grasping its implications. "We need to get this to the right people." "Not just the information," Navia corrected. "They need me, a living example of what they're fighting against and someone who understands how the technology works." Her voice lowered. "But the collectors won't stop hunting us. They've summoned a harvester." "They what?" "A larger vessel, designed for mass retrieval operations." She gestured toward the eastern horizon, where a distortion was becoming visible, like heat waves but more pronounced, bending light around something massive yet unseen. "It's already in your atmosphere, cloaked but detectable to my ship's sensors." Theo felt a chill. "Can we outrun it?" "No, but we can fight." Navia's expression hardened with resolve. "This ship was never meant for combat, but it contains something more valuable: truth. If we can broadcast what I know to enough of your world's communication networks, the invasion will lose its greatest advantage: secrecy." She guided the ship lower, heading west. "There's a research facility in your region, the Hawkins Institute. Their communication array is powerful enough to distribute the data globally." "I know it," Theo confirmed. "About 50 miles from my property, state-of-the-art astronomical research center." As they approached, the ship's sensors detected movement. 3 smaller craft had detached from the harvester and were in pursuit, closing rapidly. "Sentinel vessels," Navia explained, her hands moving faster across the interface. "More advanced than the ground units you encountered." The pod shuddered as something struck it, an energy pulse from the lead pursuit craft. Navia countered by dropping altitude sharply, skimming just above a mountain range. The maneuver bought them seconds, nothing more. "We won't reach the Institute before they overtake us," she said, her voice tense. "We need another option." Theo's mind raced. What about the university? Their computer science department has a quantum communication lab. It's primitive compared to the Institute, but it's only a few miles away. Navia considered this, then nodded, adjusting their course. "It might work. The important thing is establishing a connection to your global network." They descended toward the university campus, morning sunlight glinting off its buildings. Students and faculty were already moving between classes, unaware of the drama unfolding above. The ship's cloaking engaged as they neared, rendering them invisible to human eyes but not to the pursuing sentinels. There, Theo pointed to a modern glass building set apart from the others. The Brenner Hall of Science. The lab would be on the top floor. Navia guided the ship to the roof, where it settled with barely a sound. The Sentinels will be here in minutes. Once we connect to the facilities systems, they'll detect our presence immediately. They exited the pod, Navia transferring a portion of the ship's data to a small device that resembled a crystal. The roof access door was locked, but Navia placed her hand over the electronic keypad, the circuitry beneath her skin pulsing. The door clicked open. Inside, the quantum communication lab was deserted this early in the morning. Banks of computers hummed softly, and at the center stood a large apparatus that Theo recognized as an experimental quantum entanglement transmitter. "Will this work?" he asked as Navia approached the main console. "It's rudimentary, but yes." She inserted the crystal into a USB port, her hand splaying over the keyboard. The screens came to life, displaying information at a speed no human could process. "I'm bypassing security protocols and uploading the data package." Outside, a low humming sound grew steadily louder, the Sentinel vessels closing in. Through the windows, Theo saw 3 metallic orbs descending toward the building, their surfaces rippling like liquid mercury. "How much longer?" he asked, watching as students below pointed upward, noticing the strange objects in the sky. "The upload is at 30%, Navia reported. "We need at least 80 for critical information to be distributed." The first impact rattled the building, something striking the roof where they'd left the pod. Dust rained from the ceiling tiles. The second hit was stronger, sending equipment crashing to the floor. "They're trying to disable the transmitter," Navia said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "I can establish a defensive perimeter, but I need time." She stepped away from the console, moving to the center of the room. The patterns beneath her skin brightened until they were almost blinding, energy cascading from her fingertips as she traced complex symbols in the air. The energy coalesced into a shimmering barrier that enveloped the entire lab. 60%, she called out, strain evident in her voice. "Watch the door." On cue, the lab door burst inward. 2 sentinels entered, more refined than the forest creature they'd encountered, their forms perfectly humanoid but featureless, like mannequins cast in living metal. They moved with unnatural precision, assessing the barrier before attacking it with pulses of energy from their hands. Navia winced with each impact, the barrier flickering. 75%, she gasped. Almost there. The Sentinels changed tactics, one continuing the assault on the barrier while the other began to phase through it, its body becoming partially transparent as it pushed through the energy field. "Navia," Theo shouted in warnings. She saw the threat and redirected power, strengthening the barrier at the point of intrusion. The Sentinel became trapped half in, half out of the shield, its form destabilizing as it struggled. 88%, Navia announced. "That's enough, we need to live." The barrier collapsed as she withdrew her energy, and the trapped Sentinel fell forward, temporarily incapacitated. The second lunged for the console, but Theo intercepted it, tackling the creature with desperate strength. It felt like hitting a wall, but the impact disrupted the Sentinel's movements long enough for Navia to retrieve her crystal. "This way," she called, pointing to a service door that led to a maintenance stairwell. They fled down the stairs, the sound of pursuit close behind. Students and professors scattered in alarm as they burst into a hallway, the Sentinels in close pursuit. Outside, chaos had erupted, people pointing skyward where the Harvester had partially decloaked, its massive form now visible as a dark silhouette against the morning sky. "The ship is compromised," Navia said as they ran across the campus quad. "We need another way out."